Welcome, everyone. I'm Jay, and I'm here with Jessica, and we're the founders of Eleusinia Retreat. Today, we wanted to actually talk about how to tell your family, or should you tell your family that you're attending a psychedelic retreat. So, Jess, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on should you tell your family?
Well, yes, you should definitely have someone that you trust know where you're going anytime you plan to go travel. But I think that sometimes these experiences, it's unpredictable to know how important or how sensitive you're going to be about that experience after you get home. So I would keep my circle tight and close.
Now, we know that, psychedelics are in the news. It's getting a lot more socially accepted. But isn't it also true that most people with experience with psychedelic happen, or a lot of them, at a very young age, and generally in some sort of recreational setting?
Yes. And if you do plan to go to a psychedelic retreat and have a more serious type of experience, something that is more transformational, it might be uncomfortable if you chose to share that news or share the fact that you were going with someone who has a more casual, less respectful type of relationship with psychedelics.
And it's a different purpose. A lot of people, when they experience psychedelics at a younger age, they're not in that same position in their life when they choose to come to an actual psychedelic retreat, such as ours.
Right. So their experience is going to be completely different.
And their take on it might be different, too.
Yes. And the way that they choose to talk about it might be a little bit uncomfortable for you if this is something that is important to you.
And especially if you've had somewhat of a profound experience at the retreat, discussing that with somebody who's only experienced it in a recreational setting, they may not give it the same weight, or, it may change your relationship with that person.
Right. Definitely. I don't know, Jay, like if you were going to a psychedelic retreat, would you have shared it with your family?
No, probably not. Not initially, because I think I come from a family, my parents, they're in their 80s. So they grew up in a generation where something like this is only seen in a recreational setting. And they are not necessarily interested or have not even looked into the possible medical benefits that are only now really being examined and looked into. So essentially, you just mentioned the word to them that you're going to psychedelic retreat or that you're taking psychedelics. There's already a judgment being formed there about that person,
Would you say that's still true?
No, I think that's because of family. And since I'm involved in this space, it's a little bit different. But it's very different even you're talking about people. I know that it's changing, that the idea is changing. But the fact is, at least in the U.S., there are a lot of people out there that still look at psychedelics in the way that they're classified. Essentially, yes, the classification is changing in some locations, but, psychedelics are still considered a Schedule 1 at the federal level. And there is a lot of pressure and shame that can be imposed on somebody if they're taking for a Schedule 1, even if it's for actual, medical purposes.
Is marijuana is it still a Schedule 1?
And marijuana, I don't believe it is per se, but I'm not sure of that. I think it's at least in certain states, obviously, legalized.
So obviously,
But on the federal sense, I still know the federal government has changed its classification. I think it's a process. I think they'll open that process.
It's in process. Okay.
But the fact is, Schedule 1 is essentially defined as no therapeutic value. Now, a lot of people are coming to realize there is a lot of therapeutic value to psychedelics. But I think that group that believes that is still pretty small and growing. And the population as a whole out there still look at it as like, why are you doing this thing? Why are you not taking medications that are prescribed by doctors as opposed to using psychedelics to, whether it's mental health, whether it's physical pain or other type of conditions that are not.
That attitude have never really struggled with their mental health. They don't have experience with those medications, and they've also probably never been diagnosed with some mystery condition that does not respond to any medication.
Right, and we have to be sympathetic to that part, that you will have family members, friends that are going to push back if you come to them and tell them that you are doing psychedelics. But the question today is, how do you tell them, or should you tell them? I agree with Jessica that if you're coming to a retreat, you're traveling, you're doing those things, you might have kids at home. Somebody has to have some idea,
of where you're going and what. But I would keep that very tight. Like, figure out who you trust, tell them. But if you're not sure yet, hold off telling others until you're comfortable with what you're willing to share.
And if you're comfortable, with how you think they're going to react to it. Most of us know our family and our friends pretty well. And we generally have a good idea on who we think are going to be extreme supportive of what we're doing. And we're going to push back. And there's nothing wrong with pushback. Because, look,
it's an education opportunity.
Our goal in the retreat is educating people as well, not only those that come to the retreat, but educating those that are interested even in the industry and the benefit it has to offer. I mean, my mom is 83 years old, and I'm still in the process of convincing her to try it, but it is a process, and I'm continually working on that. And I have made headway in that aspect of it too. And a lot of us, have parents that are getting into those.
You should tell her that if she does, she will be setting a record here, because our most mature guest so far has been 80. So she would be definitely one-upping that one.
Indeed. But or when you do talk to them, I think the best thing to do is educate them. Because their first reaction is different from everybody. You can have a lot of people who are supportive, a lot of people who understand the medical benefits and even personal growth benefits that we can experience through psychedelics. And those are not the people you're going to have a problem telling that to. It's really going to be the ones that either just look at it from a recreational sense, or those who are completely against the idea and basically think you are doing something crazy if you're traveling to go do these things.
Right.
But we have to be sympathetic that they care about you and they're worried about you, and they don't want you to go do something that could get you into trouble or end up someplace where you don't want to be. So a lot of them are doing it with a good heart, but other people are just judgmental and they've just taken a position. And you can't really educate those people, but you can educate the ones that are just truly care about you, or are nervous about it, or worried about it.
Or maybe after you do tell them, you can set down boundaries about how that conversation would continue. Because I could say, I haven't told my family about what I do.
Yeah, and indeed, as I mentioned.
But it's not because I'm worried about any type of judgment. It's just because I don't want to have the conversation. I don't want to participate in the conversation that would continue after that point.
Why do you think that conversation would go?
I'm supremely uncurious.
Yeah, but your family as well.
Exactly. And that's why I'm very uncurious.
So it'd be an issue of feeling judged.
It's not about a judgment, or just, like when something is important to you, you want to share it with people that you can respect that importance.
And what caveat I would put on this is when it comes to your fellow employee, like your colleagues at work,
oh yes,
bosses. We know it's common, obviously, when people work, they make friends with those they work with. It's very common to do so. But when you are in certain industries,
it's probably a good idea to keep it to yourself.
Right, but
we're not at that point. I would love to think that we're at the point where talking about going to a psychedelic retreat could be put in the same category of like going to any other type of wellness practice.
And I think a lot of
but we're not there.
A lot of guests who do come here are pretty smart about it. Mm-hmm. And they may. I realize a lot of us may be best friends with people we work with. We do the people we work with all the time. We know them, and there's a lot of trust and confidence that goes into telling them, and they feel a lot of trust and confidence that you're also discussing this with them or letting them know. So, but it is a value call that you have to make. I think somebody is in a position who's superior than you are. I think that can be a little bit, questionable. But again, it's a wonderful.
The whole work environment would have to be considered, and I do think that an individual can make that kind of decision for themselves. But one really important caveat there is that you should not make that decision, first off, while under the influence, or while having been under the influence recently, because they say, yes, psilocybin, the acute effects last between, let's say, 4 to 6 hours. But you're not really ready for those kinds of decisions beyond for a couple of days afterwards.
And let's not forget, a lot of people have very profound experiences when they're on psychedelics, and they do want to share that with everybody.
It's human nature.
And the world, because of what they've gone through, and what they got from it. It's human nature, like you said, to share stories with others, who we engage with, because that's how we all communicate. And I think in the back of your mind, like you just said, especially when it's very close to when you had such an experience, is just to give it some time to kind of process it. Because I think the more difficult part sometimes is not just convincing the family to come to the retreat and have the experience.
Oh yeah, how many times have we had people here say, "I've got to bring my son here. I got to bring my dad here. I have to bring," and we have had people come back with their, let's say, siblings or adult children, and I think it's a great, beautiful experience.
And you got people that, had families that were questioning this, and later on they were able to convince them of that. After your family knows you're back home safe, their viewpoints change.
It's not that they see changes in you.
Especially to see changes in you. Which I think brings up the other issue is not what to tell your family that you're coming to do at a psychedelic retreat or you're going to one, but then when you go back and you've had these experiences, and all of a sudden you want to talk about these things, and it's a very different type of conversation that you're having after your experiences that you're having before, can change some of those friendships, can change some of those dynamic relationships. And so I think that's actually something the more important part. I mean, eventually you tell people who you're going to tell that you're coming, and whether you tell them you go to psychedelic retreat, whether you tell them you're going to a wellness retreat, you may do that, and later when you come back, you may tell them, oh, by the way, it was a psychedelic retreat, not just a plain wellness retreat. But what you might notice is now have a different idea of what you consider to be important conversations in general, whether it's about life, whether it's about relationships, whether it's about family. And sometimes that can be a little bit jarring to the people, who you're about to go see again when you go back. And so I think giving them a little bit of space.
Are you talking about like how all of a sudden every conversation goes deep?
Well, it's just that you not become that weird friend at the parties. The one who
Let's talk about the universe, or
those who want to contemplate existence or contemplate the universe, which makes for a really interesting conversation, don't get me wrong.
some people might label it interesting conversation. Others might be just looking for the nearest door.
But the fact is, when you have this conversation, people are going to notice. And as long as you understand they're going to notice, and you can sort of weave that into the conversation, I think that's the best thing to do.
Yes. Well, like, for example, I have trouble maintaining relationships with people who bring up recreational use of psychedelics too much.
Yeah, and I understand when, people go to Burning Man, they go to different places where the psychedelics are commonly available, are in a recreational setting, and people like to share their story. So I can understand. But I think when you come to a retreat, it's partly our job actually to sort of navigate some of that conversation for our guests so that they're at least, comfortable with it. But, a recreational use, what I say is when you're younger, and I realize a lot of young people go through a lot of traumatic experiences, but generally the baggage of life is what eventually leads us to psychedelics. And that takes time.
A rich kind of experience.
And to have a really meaningful, deep experience, you sort of have to have lived for a certain period of time and experienced life to sort of have that. So I think, like I said, not only the people you spoke to, the ages that they're at, obviously a lot of my guests will not tell their kids. Maybe they'll tell their adult kids, and they'll come around to even, an adult kid might not even be, pro psychedelics in any way kind of thing. So these judgment calls get made all the time. And I realize where you want to share, you want to have those moments. And a lot of times, like I said, people come with family members. They come subsequently with other family members. And they do have that bond. And it gets even more tricky when we're talking about spouses. And, it's one thing telling somebody who's younger or like your extended family, but sometimes you may even have a spouse that's not supportive or is supportive. And then, you do really have to find those channels of support after the experience as well.
Right. The profile of your social interactions might change after having these experiences.
Yeah. So like we say, one thing, we pick the correct person that you want to tell this to, that you think will provide you valuable information. I mean, that doesn't mean you have to be all gung-ho about it, but they're open to the idea. But at the same time, they're raising questions and stuff that you'd like to raise, for your own protection, that aspect of it. I think that's great. I think having that open mind, but being cautious, curious, and sharing with those people sometimes can be beneficial. But obviously avoiding people at work, even if you're best friends with them, at least, till you know a little bit more and you feel comfortable based on your position or your place in whatever business or company or work that you're in. And then just educating the people. You'll be surprised at how people come around to these things when they learn a little bit more about them, especially if they're hearing it from you.
Especially if they see the change in you. They see something different.
That's what you come here.
So to conclude, the answer to the question, should I tell my family about my plans to go to a psychedelic retreat? It's a complicated answer. It's not just one, yes or no. I would say be careful a little bit about who you choose to share it with in the beginning, because you're not sure what you're sharing yet. You haven't had the experience before coming to the retreat. When you do come to the retreat, you'll know for sure what you're sharing. But if you're too open about it beforehand, you're pretty much signing yourself up for conversations that you might not want to be there for later on.
I think there's two parts to this. There's one, the people you share with before you come to a retreat, on that you're going, why you're going, what's compelling you to go, and why you're selecting one place over another place. Because that can be comforting for them too. That they know you've done your research, that they know you're not just doing something on a whim kind of a thing. So there's a lot of people who do that as well. But at least the one that you have any concern about that. But then there's also who you're going to share with once you've gone through this experience. And they may not be the same people, or they might be.
Yeah, I just think you're doing pretty judicious about it.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Thanks.